Good evening and welcome to another episode of PharSide Pholios. I am your host, Monica Leek, and we are here celebrating Read a New Book Month during the month of December. And nothing's better as a stocking stuffer than a great book. Like reading something, or popping open a new book on Christmas Eve. That's a great way to kick off your holiday. So it's Read a New Book Month. So what better way to continue our celebration than to interview another amazing author? Today we have with us Tom Lucas, who was born and raised in Detroit, and although he's currently enjoying the lack of snow and ice in Florida, he remains a son of the post-industrial apocalypse. So he is a college professor, author, and spoken word performer. Neat. He's been published in Orlando Weekly, Writer's Digest, the Writer's Monthly Review. And so I know a lot of our club readers and emerging writers are faithful subscribers to those two magazines. And then, of course, the South End, Oakland Press, the Macomb Daily, Orbit, Anthropomorphic, and You Magazine. He has also been featured in literary journals such as The Right Place at the Right Time, Graffiti Rag, and Effed Up Fairy Tales, and Dark Fire Fiction. He has performed on the Lollapalooza stage as well as guest spots on CIMX, WDET, and WJR. When not writing, he likes to drive fast and take chances. So welcome to the far side, Tom Lucas.
Monica, thank you so much for having me here.
All right. So I'm interested right off the bat from your bio. How do you transition from, I guess, spoken word to college professor? How do those intersect?
Wow, that's well, it's been a long journey. I'll be 54 next week, and when I started with spoken word, I was probably about 19 or 20. So we're talking the early 1990s. And back then, I mean, things are just so much more different now. It's so much easier to get your work out there for people to check out. Like just this your video, your show right here, the interview or whatever. Those kind of opportunities didn't exist for us back in the early 90s. So the only way, if you weren't published, to get people to check out your writing was to go places and read it to them
Mm-hmm.
and see how it went. So that was kind of my initial sort of interest in spoken word, was just as an opportunity to sort of platform my writing and see where the funny parts really funny, where the sad parts really sad, like gauge reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And writing is a funny thing in that you don't really get immediate feedback most of the time for your work. You're on your own. You write what you're going to write, and then you put it out in the world, and people enjoy it on their own, quietly, and there's never really a conversation or any kind of a feedback loop. But spoken word, and I know it's nerve-wracking, a lot of people don't want to do it, but for the writers who might be listening, go out at least once and just see how it feels. But in terms of getting to a college professor, I taught in a creative writing program for about 10 and a half years. I am still at that same school, but I've moved up and I've moved to a different degree program. I think that it helped me in education by virtue of public speaking and being in front of people and trying to, teaching is often a story that you're trying to tell, and stories can teach us lessons. And so I feel like it kind of was a natural progression, if that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense. It's interesting to see how, things that you do, maybe as a college student, early in your writing career, or if you were seriously, writing at that time, and then fast forward to being a professor and, continuing, the writing piece. So it's always interesting to see how those paths intersect in the life of an author, an established author who's been around for a minute.
Well, the funny thing is I started as a journalist. I went to
Okay.
Wayne State University, so anybody from Detroit or the Midwest would certainly know Wayne State. And our newspaper was a daily, Monday
Mm-hmm.
through Friday. So I was writing all the time. And I was also writing to deadline, which really helps me stay focused for when I have writing projects to this day. But I always thought I would just be a journalist,
Mm-hmm.
and I really enjoyed doing film review and entertainment review and things like that. It wasn't until I basically took a creative writing class and saw that there was a different outlet for writing, and I kind of kept that in my back pocket for a long time as I grew through, my professional career, doing more technical writing and copywriting and things like that. It wasn't until later in life that I really embraced writing fiction. So yeah, it's kind of funny how it all shook out.
And so, with your given your journalistic background, um, would you consider or have you thought about, the nonfiction, going into the nonfiction realm, since you have kind of some of that experience from the journalistic side? Would you consider writing in that realm, or you kind of turn that, um, I guess, switch and said, you know what, I want to focus on the fiction?
Uh, at this point, I find fiction more fun
Okay.
and more enjoyable, and I enjoy sort of putting that kind of creativity out in the world. But there are times where, especially having been in education for about 18 years now, where I have written things that are, pertaining to, my area of education or higher ed in general. And I have enjoyed that. I'm certainly capable of it, and I am sure that before it's all said and done, I will have written some of that. I do enjoy creative nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
When I do read it and come across it, I really admire people who can take their life stories or their experiences and really make them an engaging and immersive reading experience. And I think, like anyone, I've lived some life, and there's definitely some things that I could share from it that might help someone, either as a positive or a negative to stay away from. And I do have a few pieces. I haven't really sought publication for them, but I've written a bit about my earlier years where I was a bit untamed, I guess would be a polite way to say that. So now we're a homebody, but at one time, not so much.
So, those who are watching live and those who will catch us by replay, we are here on the far side with Tom Lucas to talk about Research Randy and the mystery of Grandma's half-eaten pie of despair. So let's get into that. You know, in reading it, it appears, that intro area, it appears that there are other stories out of, you know, that could be, that Research Randy could be a part of a series. So is it actually a series, or is it something that you're looking towards making a series out of the story of Research Randy?
Great question. So my inspiration for the book is I was a reader from a very early age, and one of the book series that I really loved were the Encyclopedia Brown books, where you could solve the mystery along with the reader. And I just sort of, as a creative exercise, or one day it just sort of popped in my head, what if you took like Encyclopedia Brown and put him into a terrible Lovecraftian cosmic horror type situation, and very much not a kid's detective normal sort of case. And how could you write that? What would be the form in which it took? And so what I decided was that I created an imaginary series of books, which are the Research Randy books. And this is the last book in the series because the author of this beloved series has encountered something so horrible it has corrupted his mind, and he's being forced to write this last cursed book in the series. So, like Blair Witch, there really was no Blair Witch legend. They turned it into it with some clever marketing. Research Randy comes as a fictitious artifact. Now that being said, I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed writing it, and I really like Randy and his sister Charlie a whole lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of would like to do more with them. So it is quite possible that Randy and his sister Charlie may step into some other uh, classic or beloved middle grade or YA genres or somewhat hidden books. Someone suggested having them step into a Judy Blume type book, and I thought, oh boy, what
Wow.
that would be pretty fun to write.
That would
So,
be fun. Yeah.
because I'm a sentimental guy, and I just really cherish those books that I read growing up, you know, and now maybe I will play around with them a little bit.
All right. So, um, the book starts off with these words: "The new house sucked." Was this a view held by both Charlie and Randy, or one more than the other? And that couldn't be any more middle grade language than
Yeah.
that I hear on the daily.
Sure. So where is that coming from? So in the fictitious Research Randy series of books, they've always lived in a place called Serenity Bay, which is
Mhm.
this really stereotypical or archetypical picture perfect little, American town, and it's on the water, and all those sort of tropes that you would find in a middle grade book in terms of the people who live in town and all that, right? But what this book, has what it has happened to them is they suddenly had to leave Serenity Bay, and they've moved into the opposite. So Serenity Bay is kind of like a Southern California town. It's a perfect little suburban area with the beach and the coast and all that. And Effingmouth, which is where they're forced to move, is a New England Lovecraftian, damp, rainy, cold, dark sort of place. So, in the view or in the mind of the characters, Randy and Charlie, who are maybe high school freshman, sophomore age, maybe Randy's eighth grade. I don't really state it. It's kind of up for you to decide. They would think that the new, in quotes, house sucked, and I enjoyed writing in that form quite a
Mhm.
bit, and I enjoyed doing some unexpected things with it because when it breaks form and Randy starts talking like a character in a Lovecraft story, it gets really weird for the reader, and I like writing weird things,
Mhm.
you know. Um, and so it was kind of fun to break out of character, so to speak, when the opportunities in the story presented themselves.
So when I guess when the where does this interest in kind of crime solving come from? I mean, does it come for Randy and Charlie? Does it just come from, their, is it related to their father's prior career, or is there something else that kind of got them um, motivated to into like, oh, we can solve that. I've got an answer to that. Kind of the mysteries around that they find themselves solving.
Okay, well, I think it comes to them naturally. So if Research Randy is a direct lift of Encyclopedia Brown, for anyone who read those books, his father is the chief of police in the small town that they live in. And when his father can't solve a case, he brings it home to the dinner table, and Randy, or not Randy, Encyclopedia Brown will solve the case. And you would flip to the back of the book and see what clues Encyclopedia Brown had, locked into. So Encyclopedia Brown is just a really smart kid who was, very much engaged in what his father did for work. And um, so Randy is that same sort of thing. His father was always the chief of police in Serenity Bay, and he's very smart and he likes a good puzzle or mystery. So naturally, he wants to solve. He has a very curious mind. So he always wants to learn more. And in the case of this book, learning more gets him into a lot of trouble and puts him into a lot of danger. And then to provide sort of an opposite, that's not the word I'm looking for, but his sister Charlie's complementary in that
Mhm.
Randy is very intellectual and not a very physical character, and his sister Charlie is known for delivering knuckle sandwiches in the language of the book. She protects her brother. She's the strong one, but to give her an extra feature and to make her as interesting a character as Randy, I made her kind of a psychic or a medium. So she
Mhm.
can sense ghosts. She can sense when there are supernatural things, about. And
Mhm.
Randy doesn't always believe her because he just wants facts and and science. Charlie provides that balance and also gives readers another primary character to associate with if Randy isn't really like their speed. So tried to have something for any reader in the book.
And so, with them being the age that they are, they're teenagers or preteens, teenagers coming of age, dealing with, you know, a life move, a family move, trying to fit in. What is the significance of that place that they moved to? I mean, I thought it was a cute name, effing mouth. Um, and
Yeah.
how does and so how does that kind of impact, what they encounter, the mysteries that end up they need to solve while there?
Okay. Well, they're forced to move, and when I was a child, I had to move a bit, and I moved from one situation to one that was like completely opposite in every way, and that was pretty stressful for me at first, that transition.
Mhm.
And what I did and what the characters do in the book is you I guess you start transitioning by continuing to do the things that you would normally do. And in the case of Randy and his sister Charlie, that's figure out the neighborhood, figure out if there's any cases to solve, and just kind of continue doing what they're doing. But what they learn is that this is a town with very different rules and very different kind of people, and they have to struggle for a bit to make that transition and get adjusted. And by the time they get adjusted, they learn some terrible secrets, and things get pretty creepy and scary towards the end of the book.
And it jumps right into when, in their initial, at the beginning, when they're initially kind of, you know, exploring, exploring the area. They're, like finding their path through, through the area and come across, hear something. The next thing you know, they're in the tree house, climbed up in somebody's tree house, and there's a kid crying in the treehouse.
Yeah.
Um, is this kind of, is it random falling? Do they randomly just fall to these problem solving situations, and I mean, did they get it right? Did Randy get that particular case right? And was that enough to start him off on, I guess, feeling more confident about where they are?
Yeah, for sure. So, in the Encyclopedia Browns, you pretty much started solving cases right away. There was, in each case was its own thing, and I think as a child reader, I enjoyed, not being a long story from beginning to end of the book, but rather,
Mhm.
each little chapter was its own thing. And so
Mhm.
what I wanted to do is, although things get weird and dark and creepy, I didn't want that to start on page one.
Okay.
So they've moved to the new town, and the new town is off. It is not where they used to live, and people are very different, and they're pretty dubious about all of it. But yeah, they go explore the town. They do see that there's some kids in the town, although they dress funny and talk a little bit differently. And there's every neighborhood has the cranky old guy who keeps your baseball if it falls in their yard. And this town has its own version of it, even though he dresses up in a tuxedo and a top hat when he comes out to claim their baseball. But anyway, some of the things seem to be pretty normal for the town. And I thought, well, I don't want the cases that Randy solves to be super weird and scary right off the bat. So let's have one or two chapters that feel pretty much like they should feel
Mhm.
for a book series like this. But as the book goes on, it gets kind of weirder and weirder. And that first case. The kid in the treehouse is crying because he's being bullied, and um, he's being bullied because he was a Make-A-Wish kid, right? He
Mhm.
was a Make-A-Wish kid. He was sick, and he had a wish, and it basically required the whole town to come out and support him and give him a day, and everyone was happy to do it. But then he never was really that sick. He got better, and now he's fine. And the town is kind of mad that he put him through all that. So, the neighborhood kids kind of throw eggs at his treehouse and stuff. He's a sad character, um, and maybe it's a little bit of a comment on human nature. But anyway, um, I wanted Randy and his sister to help a kid who was being bullied, but I made it weird by creating that reason for him to be bullied because I wanted to
Mhm.
communicate. This isn't exactly a regular Randy book, if there was such a
Mhm.
thing. And so things are kind of off, a little off right off the get go. But I wanted it to feel at least a little bit normal. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So the way you've structured this particular story, would it would the chapters kind of stand, on their own as a singular, you know, story like some of the I guess you say it like some of the Encyclopedia Browns where each one case of the da 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 da, you know.
Sure.
Um, so is that how you saw it when you started writing it, or um, did you make some shifts and changes along the way?
Okay. I think when I first started writing it, yeah, absolutely. Each one would be a separate thing. And somehow through the course of it, I would, answer the big question, which is what happens when Encyclopedia Brown meets Cthulhu or some other
Mhm.
Lovecraftian horror. But, you have an idea. And for anyone who's a writer, you have an idea, and it might be the exact same idea somebody else is having somewhere else in the world. But it's about the execution. So I thought, well, I want to do this, but how how do I make this work? So the first part of the book, yeah, I think you could read the separate cases or chapters, and they you could walk away from them, they make sense. But at some point the bigger sort of idea had to take grip of the story, and then it becomes all the chapters start linking together into a longer narrative. So the book starts just like that, each case on its own, and then when it turns the corner, it does not go back to its original form.
So without giving the whole story away, what's kind of the premise behind this research, Randy, and the mystery of Grandma's half-eaten pie of despair?
I'll forever have entertained myself with that title. Um, well, the 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 idea behind the book is, as sort of mentioned earlier, is that the writer of a long-running children's series is writing this last book. Something has corrupted his mind, and this is going to be the last time his characters of these stories are ever told. So um, the the book has to sort of honor that idea, and by the end of the book, um, it has kind of broken the fourth wall. So the characters start talking directly to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the author tells you that as a reader, you are complicit to their doom because you are participating by reading the story and allowing it to happen. So if you didn't read this story, it would never happen to them. So it does sort of make a sort of a very small statement on our role as the reader and how we participate with the books that we read and perhaps how we talk about them after the fact. So um, I think that's pretty much how I had to approach it.
So what are like one or two things that want your YA tweens, in between middle graders, ninth or 10th graders, high schoolers, to take away from research, Randy?
Well, p- p- the book is partially written for nostalgic older readers such
Mhm.
as myself who grew up with these books, but have also gone on to read. I'm a big lover of horror, and have gone on to read a lot of other things and sort of bring them back a little bit to enjoy the read. For the younger reader, I would like it to be an introduction to maybe a little bit more sophisticated aspects of horror or the
Mhm.
genre. These things do come out. Scooby Doo even had a Lovecraft episode.
Mhm.
These things do come through children's or young adult media as it is. So it's perhaps nothing new, but kind of a little bit as a sort of gateway into that literature. So they may see references in this book and think, oh, well, what's this? What's that? And it may launch them into, a whole new sort of world of horror and reading. That being said, and for anyone watching who's hopefully interested in the book is, I would say, a solid PG-13. It can get a little, it's a little rough at the end, and there is one curse word, that I used for impact. And it really depends on if you have a kid and you're interested in the book, you think they might get a kick out of it, knowing what they read already and what you're comfortable with as an adult. I was at a book event the other week, and a woman came up and she asked me about the book, and I told her, and she's like, "Oh, my kid's totally okay to read something like this," but the next person might not be. And as something I've mentioned before in other interviews or opportunities I've had to talk to people, I read Cujo when I was 11. Cujo is not a kid's book, but it was fine with me. I was totally okay with it, and I was already reading a lot of pretty scary books at that point already. But for other kids, that might not be. So I would really want people to be sure of what they're getting before they pass the book on.
So, do you feel like horror is your niche, um, or are there any other genres you want to eventually explore?
Well, I have two previous books, two other books, and I would say that those are kind of science fiction and
Hmm.
and fantasy. And as a reader, I read predominantly science fiction, then horror, then fantasy, out of the genres, out of the fictional genres. So I like all those forms. There's something about horror that I really like because the world building is usually tighter, and
Hmm.
it's usually more in our kind of real world. Whereas when I write science fiction or fantasy, I taught world building for like 10 years in a creative writing program. To do it right, you really have to think things through, and
Hmm.
sometimes I'm a little impatient. I just want to get started writing right away. So I will hold off on the stories that require more world building, although I really do enjoy it.
So, given your interest in like fantasy, science fiction, and horror, were there any particular authors that you went to kind of give you a point of reference or structure that you modeled after, even for language or setting?
Okay, so specifically, I read a lot of Lovecraft and some of his other contemporaries at the time, so
Mm-hmm.
that I could sort of part of it was to sort of honor the literature, but also to really be able to pull out references and play around with it a little bit for sure. In terms of reading, I'm pretty basic in that I really am a big Stephen King fan, and I do have a lot of Stephen King on the shelf, but I do read lots of other, horror writers for sure. I would say the Lovecraft literature specifically was the influence here.
All right. So, given that you kind of got a mix of, you know, audience, a mixed audience, for, you know, adults, and, the YA, what's kind of your, um, the best advice you'd give somebody trying to, write for a YA or, teen audience?
Okay, so I'm sure you've had other YA authors on your show or talked to other ones, and I wouldn't present myself as a YA author, but I will tell you, for I think that those years, having taught middle school, having taught high school, having had a particularly tough high school experience myself, right?
Mhm.
That it is a time of great transition. You have a lot of emotions and no context for those emotions. When I taught middle school, I would describe it as feral. Those kids were just they were they they were explosions of emotion and energy, and there's a lot going on there. So I would say, obviously there are things that as adults um, we deal with that um, you know kids at that age don't necessarily deal with, but I thought of Randy and Charlie as little adults. I wrote them with respect in the sense that I didn't think of them as being dumb, I guess is the best way to say it, just dumb kids. I wrote them like they were little adults. They didn't have quite all the answers that an adult character might have, but their emotions were valid and authentic in the situations that they were in. And that's how I tried to write it. I think that if you are looking at being a children's author or writing for these different age groups, it's important to know about brain development and childhood development and at what stages certain things are happening so that you can write for that particular demographic. Certainly what you would write for very small children is different than what you're going to write for, say, a young high schooler in terms of emotional development, brain development, and things like that. So I hope that's helpful and kind of answers the question.
Definitely gives us some good nuggets for those who are, thinking about writing for, the different ages from, I guess you could say, Head Start to high school in that bracket. So thank you for those wonderful nuggets. Can you tell us how viewers can purchase your book? Remember, y'all, this is Read a New Book month in the month of December for all of us literary nerds.
And yes, right. I have read a new book week. I try to, I've always got a book going or two. And I would point out that Randy is available as an ebook at only $3.95. So if you got some Kindle credits or you get a little Amazon card, of course the book's available at Amazon, but it is also available for order through any bookseller. So if you don't do the Amazon thing, you prefer to go elsewhere, you could order it from Walmart, you could order it from Powell Books, you can order it from Rakuten. It's all over the place. You can find me on social media on Facebook at Tom Lucas Author, Instagram Tom Lucas Author, and my you can also find my other books and more about me at my website, which is room1331.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom Lucas, for sharing your evening with us here on the far side. We wish you continued success with research, Randy, and the mystery of Grandma's half-eaten pie of despair, and all the wonderful projects that you have to come. So, those who are watching live and those who will scroll back during the holiday break and watch the replay, make sure you're staying tuned to the Farside Co-ed Book Club Facebook page for more author interviews and posts as we celebrate Read a New Book Month during the month of December. And we'll definitely be keeping and following Tom Lucas to see what he rolls out next. So we're excited about every opportunity we have to promote new books to our readers in our book clubs around the region, as well as around the nation who may be watching from overseas and all of that great stuff. So we're excited here on the far side. So until next time, make sure you're staying tuned. Many roots, many voices are a part of the infinite story. So plant your seed and have a great and wonderful evening.
Thank you, Monica. It was great.
Mm.